The music industry in Ireland. So when we're talking about the Irish music industry, we've two sources of statistics that we can dip into. One is a report done by the Music Board of Ireland, which no longer exists. It was a government body. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And along with some economic consultants, they put together a report called The Economic Significance of the Irish Music Industry. That was back in 2002. And that's all we had until 2017 when IMRO did a report. Now, the main thing to know about the Irish music industry is that we are a big global player, even though we're a very small country. I did the maths, and we represent about 0.0006% of the world population. So we're a small island. So the fact back in 2001 that we were responsible for 2.3% of world CD sales is massive. That's a figure that's about 3,000 times bigger than our population. We are the fifth biggest provider of pop hits globally as a country. So why is that? Think for a second. Why are we so popular internationally as musicians and as artists? Are we just amazing for some reason? Are we just this land of saints and scholars and musicians? Do we have a natural affinity to music? Is it because we were colonized? Is it something about the resistance spirit and being colonized for so long? The music industry is very important for our economy. Back in 2002, they reckoned it was worth about 0.5% of the Irish economy, which was bigger than the newspaper and the magazine industry at the time. It's worth less now because we suffered a lot, like all the recording industry suffered during the file sharing period. Sound recording output by Irish artists is almost 30 times the worldwide average. So again, we're very productive when it comes to music. Irish music has contributed hugely to the positive perception of this country internationally. When we're portrayed in international media, think about it. How are Irish people portrayed in international media? When we're in The Simpsons, there's music in the background. There's Irish music in the background. It's a big part of our identity. And it's a positive thing. Because we're seen as this vibrantly creative people. You know, there's some negative stereotypes.
Ask Hennessy, Tennessee, Morrison, Shaughnessy, Reardon and Rooney, they'll tell you the same. McNulty, Mulrooney and Cotter and Clooney all feel the
Of course,
same
there'll be
mixture
the
of pride
drinking
and of
thing,
shame.
but there'll be drinking, there'll be music, and there'll be this kind of soulfulness and thing. Yeah, and music is a big part of that.
He was called. He served. He is counted.
And music is part of the draw for tourists. Someone's coming to this country and they want to immerse themselves in Irish culture. Where better than an old pub with some trad music playing, a roaring fire. You know, that's where people go to get a taste of Irish culture. And that's worth a lot to our economy. So we've looked at branding before in terms of bands and musicians, but let's think about the Irish brand. As I said, this reputation for creativity, musicality and the crack, yeah? None of that, that's all positive. That's all stuff that people want to be associated with. And there's around 70 million people globally that claim Irish heritage. Or 4 million people if you believe Ed Sheeran. Well, 4 million people who would claim to be Irish or have some sort of affinity to it. Now, 400 million people love Irishness. Then, you know, Ed Sheeran's not stupid. He sees that as a market. And he's right. And a market, that means money. So an artist that can integrate their Irishness, an Irish artist that can integrate their Irishness into their brand has a big advantage. Now this will sit very naturally with some people, not so naturally with other people. You have, I don't know, the Cores, they are from a trad background, I'm pretty sure. So that was kind of a natural thing. And then you have more modern alternative trad acts like Lankum. They're representing Irish music on the world stage. But you did have bands like Westlife, I remember. They were one of the biggest boy bands in the world. But I remember they would have a breakdown in their song. It's a big pop ballad, and then all of a sudden, like the bodhrán would come in, the tin whistle would come in, the uilleann pipes would kick in, and it would all get very Irish in the middle of it before it goes back to the "Ooh, I love yous" at the end of it. So that could be an example of a record label marketing department saying, actually, can we get the fader with the shamrock on it and just turn that up a little bit, please? In other words, can we make this a bit more Irish so we can market it to these 400 million people who are out there who love all the Irish stuff? So think for a second then, what is it that makes these 400 people, back to the question, 400 million people who want to identify as Irish, even if they're not Irish. What advantages have we got? Well, one big advantage is we're an English-speaking country that isn't the UK and isn't America. What I mean by that is the UK and the United States have a lot of baggage with wars, colonisation. The UK in particular are kind of the bad guys of history, along with the other colonising countries in Europe. Whereas we were the underdog. We were colonised for 800 years and we effectively fought and won back our freedom. That's a story that has, good currency around the world. So it's easy to like the underdog. It's easy to identify with the underdog. So it's easy to like the underdog. It's easy to identify with the underdog. Everybody feels like that at some stage. So we have the English language, but as well as that, we have a certain way with the English language. We have what's known as Hiberno English. Hiberno English is phrases that you probably use every day, like if you've said, I'm doing my essay, or, for the week that's in it. People outside Ireland don't say the week that's in it, or I'm doing my essay, or I've some hunger on me. That's the way Irish people talk, and it comes from, it's actually not incorrect. It will be correct in Oscailga, in Irish. And if you translate it literally from Irish into English, that's why we say that we have something on us, like I've a hunger on me, tá ucras orm. I'm pretty sure that means I've a hunger on me as well. And authors can make great use of this just by writing the way people talk in Ireland. We talk in a very inventive, creative way. Like, say, here's something from a Kevin Barry book. Your man had a mouth of teeth. Your man had a mouth of teeth on him like a vandalised graveyard. You will hear Irish people say things like this. There's a kind of a pride and a wit in language. So you have that wit of language along with the weird syntax. It's like Yoda from Star Wars style syntax of how we arrange sentences. And this will sound comfortable and familiar to us, and it's the way we think and it's the way we talk. But people outside of Ireland hear this and they just hear wit and poetry and the music in the language, and they're impressed by it. Now, just to give you a further example, here's Kevin Barry reading from his excellent book City of Bohane, and just listen to the way he weaves the language with common phraseology that you've used yourself or your parents would use.
So now I'm going to read two extremely short pieces. I'm going to read a little bit of fiction from the novel, and I'm going to read a little bit of fact about how I ended up living in a Garda station in County Sligo. So I'll read the fiction first, because that's less strange. It's called The City of Bohane. Now, Bohane is an evil, vicious, malevolent little city somewhere on the western seaboard of Ireland. And it's the middle of the 21st century. And it's the story of how things are out in Bohane at this time. And I think it's fair to say that things aren't great. People keep asking me, by the way, where is it really? And I refuse to be drawn, but I am going to read this in a Limerick accent. From chapter 1 of the novel City of Bohane, a chapter titled The Nature of the Disturbance. Whatever is wrong with us is coming in off that river. No argument, the taint of badness on the city's air is a taint off that river. This is the Bohane River we're talking about. A blackwater surge, malevolent, it roars in off the big nothing waste, and the city was spawned by it and was named for it, City of Bohane. He walked the docks and breathed in the sweet badness of the river. It was past midnight on the Bohane front, and there was an evenness to his footfall, a slow, calm rhythm of leather on stone, and the dockside lamps burned in the nighttime a green haze, the light of a sad dream. The water's roar for Hartnett was as the rushing of his own blood, and as he passed the merchant yards, the guard dogs strung out a sequence of howls all along the front. See the dogs, their hackles heaped, their yellow eyes livid. We could tell he was coming by the howling of the dogs. Polis watched him, but from a distance. A pair of horse Polis watering their pieballs at a trough across in Smoketown. Polis were fresh from the sight of a reefing. "You lamping him over," said one. "Albino motherfucker." "Set your clock by him," said the other. Albino, some called him. Others knew him as the long fella. He ran the Hartnett fancy gang, and he cut off from the dockside and walked on into the back trace, the infamous Bohane Trace, a most evil labyrinth, an unknowable web of streets. And he had that back trace look to him. He was a dapper buck in a natty boy Crombie, the Crombie draped all casual-like over the shoulders of a pale grey Italian suit. Mohair. Mouth of teeth on him like a vandalised graveyard. But we all have our crosses, and it was a pair of hand-stitched Portuguese boots that slapped his footfall, and the stress that fell, the emphasis was money. Hard got the riches. Oh, the stories that we told out in Bohane about Logan Hartnett. Dank little squares of the trace opened out suddenly like gasps, and Logan passed through. All sorts of queer hawks lingered in the backtrace in the small hours. They looked down as he passed by. They examined their toes and their sacks of tawny wine. You wouldn't make eye contact with the long fella if you could help it. Strange. But we had a fear of him and a pride in him both. He had a fine hold of himself, as we say out in Bohan. He was graceful and erect, and he walked straight out ahead always with the shoulders thrown back like a general, and he walked the Arab tangle of alleyways and wines that make up the Bohan trace, and there was the slap, the lift, the slap, the lift of Portuguese leather on the backstreet stones, yes, and Logan was in his element as he made progress through the labyrinth. He feared not the shadows. He knew the fibres of the place. He knew every last twist and lilt of it. Jenny Ching waited beneath the May tree in the 98ers square. He approached the girl and his step was enough. She needn't look up to make the wreck. He smiled for her all the same, and it was a wry and long-suffering smile, as though to say, "Is this more of it, Jenny?" And he sat on the bench beside. He laid a hand on hers that was tiny, delicate, murderous. The bench had dead seasons of lovers' names scratched into it. "Well, Gerline," he said. "Dude up in Reefed in Smalltown," she said. "He was a Cusack off the north side." "And did he have it coming, Jenny?" "Don't they always," she said, "the Cusacks." Logan shaped his lips tenderly in agreement. "The Cusack family has always been on the crooked side, girl," he said. Jenny Ching was 17 that year, but wise beyond it. Careful she was, and a saucy little ticket in her low riders and wedge heels, her streaked hair pineappled in a high bun. She took the butt of a stogie cigar from the tip pocket of her white vinyl zip-up and she lit it. "I got enough of me fucking plate now in Bohan," she said. "I know that, Jenny. The Cusacks," she said, "are going to have a bake on them for vengeance. And if you're asking me, like, I reckon them tossers bulling down off the north side is the last thing Bohan